Hi guys, today's episode's going to be a little different. A lot of people see addiction as the end of the story, but for some people it's the middle. And what comes after is where the real story begins. My mom and my stepdad have walked through addiction, arrest, prison, relapse, sobriety, and now marriage. They've seen rock bottom, separately and together. They've hurt each other, they've fought for each other, and somehow through faith, hard decisions, and a lot of rebuilding, they're still here, 2 years into a sober marriage. This isn't just a story about drugs. It's a story about love, accountability, relapse, forgiveness, Christianity, and choosing whether a relationship is worth saving. In 2017, at Signal Hill in Long Beach, California, my mom and my stepdad would go there to get high. Now, we're going to bring you the story at Signal Hill. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Kristen, and this is my husband from the Broken to Redemption podcast. We're here to tell our story today that started in 2017 when we met at a detox center in Stanton, California. Um, when we both walked into that detox, we were severely broken people. And I think the first thing I said as he walked up the ramp was, "That's going to be my next relapse." I did. And from there our story just got really crazy in the beginning. We did everything that people suggested we don't do, and we left our rehab in a relationship. um it was one of the most chaotic and crazy times in my life, but in some odd ways I felt more provided for and protected and cared for than I ever had before in a relationship. We obviously didn't stay clean for very long. It started with us using acid for fun, and then it turned into drinking while we played shuffleboard, and then it went right back to the same things that we were always used to doing prior to meeting each other, which was methamphetamine and heroin.
Oh, dude, at the end, so these guys know my story.
Um, so coming into this relationship, I was walking out of a very toxic and abusive relationship. I had two children from that previous marriage, and I had very little contact with them at this point. They had moved to Idaho with my family, and I was still here in California. They knew little bits and pieces of me leaving rehab with a guy, but I was able to put on a persona that I was still clean and sober and that we were doing the things that we needed to be doing. So little by little, I was able to start having a lot more contact with them, and they were coming to visit in California for little bits and pieces of time. During those times, I was able to put myself together to a small degree, and until I wasn't. So the first couple visits went really well, and then after that it was kind of like the the wool had been pulled. Is that the right saying? Yeah. So everybody started to figure out what was going on in my life again. It was the same cycle I had previously been in, and before we knew it, we were out on the streets homeless after a few very toxic fights in our sober living. Everybody was, pretty much done with us. And so off to the races we went. We were out on the streets causing complete havoc for other people, robbing people to stay high. Uh, what else?
What didn't we do?
Yeah, what didn't we do? It was just a completely dark time in my life.
Should we tell them about Dennis?
What about Dennis?
Oh.
No. Don't talk about other people. Um, so anyways, yeah, so the cycle just continued for us, and it ended up getting worse like it always does. In December of 2017, we got arrested together, and were charged with 2 felonies. Me, 2 felonies, and him 3. We took that case to trial, and I ended up staying in county jail for 6 months, and he ended up going to prison for
3 years.
a total of 3 years. By the time I got out, I didn't know if I was gonna be able to live a normal life. I hadn't lived a normal life in a very, very long time, so when I got out of jail, I literally had nobody. As you can imagine, my family was pretty done with me too. I had very little contact with them. They took some of my phone calls while I was in jail, but, like, that was the extent of the relationship I had with them. I got out and I didn't really know what I was gonna do, but, unbeknownst to me, Brandon had set up with some distant family members for me to go stay with them, and until I could see my probation officer and get into, some sort of sober living or a program, and, it just reminded me how no matter what, like, phase of our life we were in, which was never really good since the time we met, he was always there to protect or provide for me in one way, shape, or form. Um, and I think that at that point is when I decided to keep contact with him no matter what was going on in our lives at that time, regardless of what family or friends thought, like, that was something that was very important to me. So I ended up getting out and going to his family's house for about a week, and then I went and I got into a sober living, and I started working really hard on myself. I spent the next 18 months, working very closely with a sponsor in AA and working my steps and changing my life completely. I changed so much during that time that our relationship had changed while he was in prison. Although I was still taking his calls and we were writing letters all of the time, I had so much fear in me about what it looks like when he got out, because it was one of those things that, like, when this happens, how will I react? And I always had to go back on, like, my historical patterns of how I went through those situations. And every single time I got high or I got back into a toxic situation with one person or another. And so it was actually one of my biggest fears that I had to face. And he ended up getting out a little early because of COVID. So from that point on, I remember even while he was in prison, like, I had worked the steps of AA and I diligently did my third step. Like, I even remember about a year and a half ago, I went through my God box that sits next to my bed to this day, and I started pulling stuff out of it. And it's just little pieces of paper that I've written on since I've gotten sober and since me and my sponsor worked step 3. And every single piece of paper in there, like, I literally had just given it all to God. Like, I didn't have the capacity to worry about it or even think I was capable of handling the situation on my own. And so those pieces of paper, those fears, those worries, those concerns, they all went on a piece of paper. And so I remember getting the phone call from this 619 number, and he was like, "Hey, Kristen, I'm out." And my heart dropped to my stomach because this was the moment. This was that moment that I was like, okay, well, like, I have to put everything that I've learned so far into action, you know? I love this man. I want this to work, but the realistic side of me and the historical pattern, not just with us, but just with both of our histories, like, it didn't seem very hopeful. But I did go pick him up from the train station. We got him into a sober living. And 3 days later, I got a phone call that he was getting kicked out of that sober living for using. At that moment, I wanted to be like, "Yeah, see, I was right. Like, this is not gonna work." But what I did is I did all the things that I was taught to. I called my sponsor, I called other people in the program, and I set boundaries, and at first I was really resentful, but then I realized, like, he's just an addict being an addict that has no way to treat himself right now. And so I think a few days went by and we finally got back in contact. And he was at a hotel and he was in the depths of his disease again. And it was a really dark time. Me having to navigate that for the first time sober was really difficult. I remember going to see him and, like, we can laugh about it now, but it was heartbreaking to see somebody you love so fucked up. And it brought back a rush of memories about how hard our relationship had been previous to us getting arrested together. And it was kind of that moment in my life where I was like, this really isn't gonna work, but he did the things he needed to do. He got into treatment, and I supported him. Like, I wasn't gonna just leave him, like, on his own. I still believed that it was part of my duty and part of my living amends for the things that we had been through in the past to support him through it, no matter what. As another addict and alcoholic, like, that was my duty, you know? So, it was the first time in my life I realized I could set boundaries and keep them, and, I drove him to his detox, and we had a long conversation, you know, and I just reassured him that, like, we can do this or he can do this. And I dropped him off. I think during that detox episode, I took him like cigarettes 1 or 2 times and some hygiene, right?
I don't remember.
Yeah. And a few days into his detox
Can't remember
before
what I ate for breakfast.
a few days before he was gonna get out, I remember he called me and there was something so different about his voice and about the willingness he had, you know. But at that point he still thought that he could get out and just go right back to sober living, and I knew that wasn't the truth, you know. So I think that I had to be like that person, that strong person, and be like supportive. Like, I know you think you can do that, but that's not going to work this time. Like, it's never worked before. So I told him if he wanted anything to possibly ever be work out between the two of us, that he would have to do some sort of treatment program, you know, like an extensive treatment program. We were working with years of trauma, years of behavioral patterns. You know, the last thing I wanted was to have to let him go and know what that meant. But I also knew I couldn't save him. I was still in the process of letting other people save me. So, he seemed willing, like, he was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And he went to a 90-day treatment program, the Phoenix House, and we had a lot of struggle through that too. I remember one time he convinced his caseworker to email me a letter to let me know that their clinical opinion was that he was ready to go home. And I stood my ground and I was like, he can go home. He's a grown ass adult. But like, if this has to do with our relationship and him wanting to partake in working things out between us, then I require more. I require him to complete the program. We fought tooth and nail about it, but eventually he surrendered, you know, and the one thing I had to accept is like he wasn't doing this for me. Like, this was something I had to sit back and I had to separate myself from to a certain degree, because this is his recovery, not my own. And I also couldn't allow that to affect my recovery. So I had to be the one to separate the two completely. And I even told his case manager, like, I am proud of him, I support him, but I don't want to have any part in his treatment. Like, it's not my business. This is his journey. So that being said, he completed that 90-day program and he has been a different man since then. You know, he got out and I seen a side of Brandon that I guess I had seen in the past, because I continue to say how protective and how he always provided for me in ways that I never felt before. Granted, my previous marriage was very toxic and there was a very low standard, but there was a feeling I can't explain of security that no matter how bad things were with us, I always had with Brandon. Anyways, he got out and there was a different side of him. Like, he was willing to put in a lot of work, not just into his own recovery. Like, I watched him from afar doing his own recovery, but he also put that work into our relationship and proving to me, like, little by little, that he was changing, you know, and that finally helped me to believe that this was something worth saving, you know. And I always go back to the fact that, like, without my relationship with God, because of the 12 steps of AA, I would have taken this into my own hands and we would probably have ended up dead, because we both would have relapsed together, or in prison because we both would have relapsed together and went right back to the same thing. And so today our life looks completely different, right? Like, we both work full time. We provide a household. We are in touch with all three of our children and have really good relationships with all three of our children. And it's all by the grace of God. I think about a year, I've always been, especially in my recovery, a really big God person. But over the last couple years, my relationship, my connection with God has really become more deep and not so surface level. About 2 years ago, I started praying for some of the people in my life that I wasn't sure, but I didn't feel as though they had my God in their life, or not to that extent, and he was one of them. And, it was just one of my morning prayers all the time, and about a year ago, he asked to go to church on Easter, and we did. Well, previous to that, we went to a church for Good Friday, and on the way to dinner after, he started questioning my God, and I got really resentful and really mad, and I was taking it personal when it wasn't supposed to be personal, but I had to really pray that out. So 2 days later, he asked to go to a church service for Easter, and I remember that it was like at that point, I could see him completely engaged in the service. And from there on, his relationship with God has grown immensely. And I think that that has even deepened our connection even more. Do I keep going? Um, we ended up getting married in June of 2024, so almost 2 years ago. Um, I would like to think we probably have one of the most healthy marriages that are based on trust, communication, all of those things that are really important. And I think that everything that we've been through in the past has brought us to where we're at today, with the combination of God and a strong connection with God. I know that the statistic is couples that have used together or have went through active addiction together hardly ever have a successful relationship after. And I think that we are part of a very small group of people that that is possible with. And I don't want to say that it was easy, because it definitely wasn't easy. But it's one of the most uh fulfilling parts of my life today. Like, I get to lay down next to the man, that I used to run the streets homeless with, and I get to lay down in our bed with a roof over our head and pray to God every night and just thank God that, like, this is the life we get to live together today. So I'm super grateful for that. And I'm super grateful for the fact that he's not just stepped in as my husband, but he has stepped in as a father figure to both of my children. I think that it is very important that he plays that role in their life today, because there was a time when they wanted to have nothing to do with him. And as a matter of fact, there was I think about 18 months after you got out of prison, before he was even reintroduced into their lives, I had to make sure that it was going to be a safe and secure situation before I brought my children into it again. And so I think that that is one of the most graceful things that has ever happened in our lives from God. Like, we are now a family unit, and prior to this, like, there was a period of time where I was choosing to run chaotically through the streets with him, without any regard to how that made my children feel. Like, I was choosing yet another man over my children, and a lifestyle that just was not godly, and not a lifestyle any mother should be living. So today it's completely different for us.
Well, thanks for sharing that and being vulnerable and honest. I'm just going to take you back to when you guys were during an active addiction and kind of the feelings that were felt. When you both were using, did you feel like you were partners in survival together or partners in destruction? Like, were you aware of the destructive patterns in active addiction?
I think when we started this, I don't think we were aware of either of those, right? At the time, we were kind of just like go with the flow, right? Not thinking about the positives, not thinking about the negatives, right? Because we were still sick. You know what I mean? We're still, even though we weren't using at the time, right? And early in recovery, right? That technically you're not sober because like you still have a lot of mental issues. You still have like a lot of
Trauma.
trauma that you need to get through. And it's like, I think we were both blind to both of those things. We just went with the flow and whatever happened, happened because we weren't ready to change. So why are we going to recognize those two things? Because it's going to be the same destructive behavior, only with a new person.
Yeah, and I do think that for me personally, it was a survival. I had been running the streets um in another county prior to coming to treatment in Orange County, and I had lost you guys I had lost contact with anybody that truly cared about me. So the people that I were running around with, like you were on your own, right? And so I was so tired and exhausted that the minute we linked up and there was like this protective layer he provided, um, it was a survival. So I think that some of the things that happened or the choices he made in our relationship, like I still felt secure because I was in survival mode and he was providing that for me.
Right. Did you ever feel responsible for each other's addiction?
No,
No,
I think we
it
had
was
both
it
been
was
so far.
equal.
Yeah.
It was both equal.
And two, we had both been so far into addiction prior to meeting and had a blip of like, we weren't even fully detoxed from the drugs before we relapsed again together. That I think that we just really found the person that matched our energy and just ran with it.
Yeah. Um, was there times when staying together made it harder to get sober? Or do you think you would have just kept going with a pattern with someone else? Like surround yourself with other people? Or do you think you guys were in active addiction for a while longer because you guys were together?
I think that there was, once we started using together, there was nothing that, two things. There was nothing that was going to separate us from each other. Like we were going to run it till the wheels fell off, in my opinion, looking back. But I also think that there was no intent on getting sober, right? Like once we had went back into the addiction, like we had fun. And I don't think that until we hit that rock bottom that we hit where we were literally separated from each other without like the only contact we had was phones, letters, and a couple face-to-face visits in jail. I just don't think that we ever considered any
So
other
there
way
was
of
no
life.
talk of getting sober during
No,
addiction. You guys were in
not
it
once
for
we
the long run.
relapsed. Yeah.
Did addiction create a trauma bond between you guys?
I think it played a part in it, right? I think that, like I said, we had both been in active addiction for so many years prior. But I do think like that one thing that I keep going back to is that feeling protected and provided like I hadn't felt for before. That did keep me trauma bonded to him.
So when you guys got in trouble and Mom, you were sent to jail, Brandon, you were sent to prison, how was your view of each other's relationship separated and getting in trouble together?
I was mad at him. I wasn't mad at him for getting in trouble together. I was mad at him for I finally was not numbed by the drugs, and I was mad at him for all the stuff that he had put me through aside from our addiction. I mean, it goes hand in hand, but kind of just the things that happen in our relationship. I definitely am not an innocent person in it, but I was mad. I was hurt. I had found more things out, and I missed him, but I hated him at the same time.
Brandon?
I think I was numb to it all because I've been in institutions my whole life. So it's not the first time going in, you know what I mean? And it's the minute I hit that cop car, I shut down. Like that's it. I'm programmed.
Was there any point, maybe that point or at all, where you guys both considered walking away from each other? Mom, or when you got out of jail and you got sober and he was in prison and he came out and he relapsed, did you consider walking away?
I think he knows the point where I started walking, where I considered walking away. Once he got to prison and I had been out and I had worked most of my steps, and that realization that he was getting out someday soon hit, and I was terrified of what that meant for me. There was periods of time where I stopped answering his phone calls and I stopped writing. I still to this day, just a few weeks ago, found letters that he had sent me that were not even opened yet,
Mhm.
that are in our garage. And you know, it was out of protection for myself because I wasn't ever fully healed from that. One and two, like I had a fear that he was going to be my next weakness.
So you are sober and you are still trying to battle this addiction, and so are you while you're sober. Do you think it conflicted your sobriety? Like, was there points, like, honestly, if, like relapsing with him?
For sure, that was a fear. I had no idea he was using the whole time he was in prison. When I picked him up, I just wanted to be so happy that he was out and I was seeing him, but he was so skinny. But in my mind, like I was like, they get in shape in prison. And so I kind of went into denial phase. So when I found out 3 days later he was using outside, I shut down completely because I was like, fuck, this is that moment.
How long were you sober for when he got out?
18 months.
18 months. So
No, a little over 18 months. So he got out in March and I got 2 years
April.
he got out in April. So I was 23 months sober.
Brandon, you said you were numb to it. Do you remember how did you, when you got out, how did you think you approached mom? Like, how did you think that relationship was gonna look like? Did you almost wish she was gonna relapse and do drugs with you and you hit the road again?
Because I like, no matter where I am in my addiction, right? If somebody's doing good, I never want to bring them down, right? This is my mess. This is my boat, and I got to float with it. Like, it's my mess. I would never want to bring anybody down at all.
Okay.
Now, if you want to party with me, let's roll party. You know what I
But
mean?
it's up to them.
It's up to them. I'm not gonna give it to you. I'm not gonna. If you come to me and you're already loaded, like, all right, let's get loaded because you're already doing it.
So you talk about that, mom. You mentioned earlier that, you had to understand that he's not getting sober for you. He's getting sober for himself. So what would you say to couples that are choosing in that moment right now that are either freshly sober or in rehab, like when to walk away from that relationship?
I think that it is so important, and I don't have like an exact time of when it's safe to start doing things together again. But I think that the biggest part of our success was the fact that I had almost 2 years of building my own foundation and my own sobriety and things that became very important in my life prior to introducing him back into it. I think that because I had those things, because of the trajectory my life had been set on from that point forward, it gave me the strength and the courage and the desire to hold the boundaries that I held when he got out and when he needed help.
This kind of goes along with it, but Brandon, if you want to talk about it too, what do you want people to understand about loving someone through addiction? Like, mom, you were sober and you were trying to convince him to get sober, but he wasn't ready yet. What would you give advice to? Like, what would, like, as the person not ready and your partner is ready to get sober?
So you have to remember that because the other person was once an addict, right? Once constantly using. So you know what that person's going through, right? And it's totally different for like, say, a normal person with an addict, right? They don't understand it, right? So all they see right now is the bad, right? All the bad. But somebody that's used with you or even just has experience with using, at one point before the using, there was a good person, you know? That's why in a lot of my groups that I teach at rehabs is I try to get them to think who they were before the drugs, right? Because most of the time they were a really great person, right? Like I know that's sometimes it's not always the case. Sometimes they have a lot of trauma when they're young and they turn to the drugs, and they don't want to remember that, right? So I try to help them rebuild who they are. But like, yeah, you have to remember the good, right? Because eventually they will want to get back to being that good again. So just don't give up. You also have to listen to your heart. Okay. Do you think that this is going to work? Right. Because at the same time, if you don't think it's going to work, why hang around and hurt yourself more
Yeah.
and enable that?
I think too, like I can't say I did it wrong or I did it right. I don't know. Like I know that for us it worked. I was I was almost too clear with him and it could have made him not feel all the way supported in the beginning when he first got out, but I was like too clear with him, like, we are not together. I am helping you.
Mm.
I am helping you to get on your feet and give you the same opportunity or foundation that I had, which was minimal, right? Like it was a roof over I went to a sober living, it was a roof over my head, but everything from there I had to do on my own. Like nobody got me a job, nobody did those things for me. Like I had to figure it out. And so but also the support, like I loved him. We had been through something, maybe not for him because it's part of his cycle, but for me, it was one of the most traumatic experiences I had ever had. And as I got out and I changed my life over those 2 years, it was actually one of the most positive, impactful situations, and he was a part of that. And I wanted to be there to support him, but I did make it very clear to him, like, we are not in a romantic relationship. Like, this is not what this is. This is me just being here for you. It was also part of, my living amends to this man that, like, he walked into a rehab. I did not care what pain or hurt or trouble he was in at the moment. And I literally said out loud to a group of people sitting at a table, that's my next relapse. And like, I fully meant what I said. And that is exactly how it turned out. So there was a lot of layers to that. In my heart, of course, I wanted it to work out. I wanted to be with him, but in my head, I just didn't have very much hope, but I wasn't going to just walk away.
So do you guys think that space needs to happen? There needs to be space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do think that couples cannot recover together. I think they need to have their own programs of recovery, their own sponsors, their whatever their recovery looks like needs to be separate.
So you're saying that probably in most cases that couples maybe should be going to different rehabs. They should not be in this. I mean, right? You guys started in
Absolutely.
the same rehab and then you went out on the streets.
Absolutely. Like,
And-
I will stand behind that.
And you guys both are, your jobs work with people in addiction, and
Yeah.
you see that all the time.
I do. I think it is very important to give yourself and the other person space to heal and find who you are as an individual.
Um, let's go back to you guys are married now. You guys are sober. How long have you guys been sober for?
I have been sober for 7 years and 9 months.
It's almost 8 years.
I'm coming up on almost 6 years.
6 years. Okay. Do you guys look at each other differently from when you were in addiction to now being sober? Like, what are things that you've like learned about each other? What are things, that stay the same?
Yeah,
For
so
attitude.
I was probably a lot nicer when I was high, honestly, but it's funny because it's a good mix, right? I still look at him as the man I fell in love with because of qualities that have always been there in him towards me, but I also just see this completely different human being. And it makes me love him even more. It's really hard to explain, but it's all God, It's still the like, let's go wreak havoc, like kind of like man that I'm sitting next to today, however, in a completely different capacity. Right?
I would just go eat and go to bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I
We
mean,
used to have to beg each other to sleep.
I would assume that with being in a relationship in addiction, there are those toxic patterns of a toxic relationship. How did those toxic patterns, did they show up like being sober? Like, maybe, I don't know, overprotectiveness, like having their own lives. Like, did any of those patterns show up being sober?
For me, yes. It was trauma though, right? Like, I had a really hard time for the first couple years fully trusting him. I had made a pact to myself and to God though that I was not going to like do the whole psychotic thing of like checking phones and doing all of these things. And that I was going to, even though I was yet at a point where I could trust him, I trusted God.
Are you saying trusting as in being addiction or loyalty?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
Okay.
We went through in a very short period of time, we went through a lot of things that broke a lot of trust, which I was also willing to accept that because I know I'm an addict, that the things we do when we're high are completely different than some of the choices we would make when we're sober, but it didn't mean that I hadn't already been through that.
Right.
So there was quite a bit of time. And the thing with Brandon is he knew that. We were both very open and honest with everything. And so he went out of his way to make sure that I knew that he was not a changed man, but that he was changing.
Right.
And that he was putting in the work. And so over time, I think that was my biggest struggle to navigate. But over time, like that has changed completely, like I think on a day-to-day basis, I don't even realize it. But like if I were to reflect back, like I don't live in fear in our relationship anymore. I'm very secure.
I think when we talked about doing this podcast and having this discussion, we really wanted to, get to people that this is a rare story, that not a lot of couples can make it out sober and have a healthy relationship, and that you have to be careful,
Absolutely.
super careful, and knowing when to walk away. What would you give advice to people that, right, you heard mom, I know for sure, like with us, like we were like, please do not get into this relationship, like hate from the outside, not hate, but like understandable hate
Yeah.
from the outside. Like, how would you give it like advice to couples to like kind of almost ignore that and keep going?
You don't ignore it. You respect it. I think there's a huge difference. And that is why another reason why it is so important for you to build your own before you try and build together.
Right.
Because there's relationships that he's a part of today, but he wasn't a part of healing those relationships. And he played a small part in hurting them even further. So, right, that was my responsibility to work on those things before you guys had to trust me, or you were willing to trust somebody else, right? And so I think that acceptance and humility are super important, and respect. Like, respect people. If they're saying, like, for example, you guys didn't want Brandon in my life, and therefore I respected that meant you did not want him in your life, and I did not push him on you.
Yeah.
I made him do the work on his own prior to saying, like, hey guys, this is what's happening in my life. This is where both of us are at today, and giving you guys the choice to allow him back in.
Brandon, do you want to kind of speak to that? Not just being an addiction, but like stepdads in general having to. I remember mom told me you guys were back together, and you guys were sober, and so, I remember being like, "Well, let me meet him like right now. Then let's meet sober Brandon." So, what kind of was going through your head? Like, how did you want to approach the situation?
I think I was more grateful for anything that you guys wanted to meet me,
Yeah,
right? Because you guys met me before and I wasn't a good person.
yeah,
Right? So because like, yeah, when you get sober, you're all for making amends. And like, even though like, yeah, I owed you guys an amends, right? Really, right? I took your mom and took her deeper, right? Got her arrested, right? Because let's be real, right? My decision to go on these stealing rampages, and I was the one driving high speed chase. Okay. So it's like I feel that I had a lot to prove. Okay. And not to mention like I put my son through a lot, right? I was never there. Okay. So I thought when the time came and you guys were ready to meet me that I can make an a living amends to my son by being there for you guys. You know what I mean? And like learn how to be a dad, right? And just hoping one day that Zach would come in my life, and it was just like I had to do it. You know what I mean? I was more than willing to step up. And that means that I had to be sober as well. Not just sober, but change the whole mindset.
right.
Because like you could still be sober and still be a piece of shit. Like, let's be real,
Right.
right? But you had to change everything. In order to step up, you had to change everything.
Yeah. Let's go into you have a son,
Yeah.
Zach. What does that relationship look like to you now?
Man, so my relationship with my son, we haven't met yet, and that's fine. It's in God's time, but we talk on a regular basis, and the other day he called me pops, and those are the things that I've been waiting for, and it sucks that we had to wait this long, but at the same time, God knew the plans that he has,
Mhm.
and even though I went through this dark time, God's using that now in me as a vessel to help other people.
Um, so we mentioned God a lot. How do you think your marriage would look like if God wasn't at the center? Well, because you didn't too it was only like about a year ago, you really like
Right.
accepted and surrendered to God. So how do you think that changed your relationship now?
I just, I don't know. It definitely, it makes me feel a lot more secure knowing that we're praying to the same God, and that I'm being prayed for by somebody that loves me a lot, right? I think that there was a part when he broke it down to me that, like, I'm not saying there's not a God, but I don't know what I believe in. And that scared me really badly, because how can I believe in it? How can I be with somebody who has a completely different view of something that's so important to me? So it definitely makes me feel a lot more secure knowing that he's working on that relationship with God. But I always laugh with God and think, like, you're just so big that it didn't matter that he wasn't praying to you. Like, all it took was for one of us to truly believe, you know?
So this is a Broken to Redemption podcast because your story is redemption. What does the redemption mean to you guys in your story?
Redemption, because we were in the darkness, we were in the trenches, right? We've been in trenches most of our life, and crawling out of the trenches at first, right? Because you got to learn to crawl before you walk, and it's a transition, right? You have to crawl, you have to walk, and you have to work. You have to walk to redemption. You have to earn it, right? It just doesn't come, And it's we had to change people, places, and things. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Our
And we
whole
had to change
mindset.
ourselves, right? Or allow God to do the work. I mean, it wasn't like we just sat back and did nothing. Like and still to this day, we keep a very open line of communication with each other. He knows me very well, so he can tell just by like a text message when I'm upset about something or when something's going on, and we talk about it. But like our entire story is redemption, you know? We met at an indigent detox and went on just this chaotic crime drug using spree. And today we live this beautiful life where we both not just like we have careers. He started this new thing of like his new Broken to Redemption, the podcast, the nonprofit organization, the homeless outreach, all of the things, and I get to be a part of that with him. Um, I think it just is complete from dark to light through and through, you know?
Any last advice or anything you want to, kind of make very clear to couples or even individuals that are struggling with addiction?
I I just want to reiterate the importance of taking time to recover on your own. I think that is one place that one issue that becomes very dangerous when couples do recovery together. Um, the other person may not make it through their recovery, and there may be a relapse on the other end. And if you're not building that foundation for yourself, you're going to be right there with them. And I think that's why so many people advocate against relationships and recovery. But, our story is different. And there was a lot of behind the work scenes that went into making it different.
Mm, for the ones still struggling out there, God already has your comeback story written.
Yeah.
When are you gonna come and get it? When are you gonna walk to get it, man?
Yeah.
It's already written. You don't believe in God? Start believing in God. Pick up the Bible, read the New Testament. I bet you it'll open your eyes then, man.
Yeah.
Until then, just know your story's written already.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that brings the end to this podcast. Thank you for listening. Brandon, you can always reach out to him. He's always here with open ears. We have resources for you guys. Thank you.